Welcome to Rehab Dialogue. Today, we open the doors to one of the most exciting frontiers in neurorehabilitation. We'll talk about innovations in stroke rehabilitation, where we talk about biomarkers, robotics, and the path to personalized recovery. I am Dr. Hansala Sheikh. I'm an academician, researcher, nutritionist, wellness coach, and the proud co founder of Rehab Dialogue. So let's dive in. Let us talk about the escalating global burden of stroke. If we talk about incidents, around 12.2 million new strokes occur every year globally. 1 in 4 persons over the age of 25 are ought to experience a stroke in their lifetime. If we talk about disability adjusted life years, around 143 million Dalis are lost annually to stroke related death and disability. It is important to notice that amongst all these DALIs, 62% occurs in people under the age of 70 years, which signifies a crucial burden to our developing age group. If we talk about the global cost, so around 891 billion US dollars are lost behind stroke and its disability. Also amongst this, 89% of the DALI burden comes from residing countries, lower and middle income countries. So this is the scenario, the current scenario of stroke around the globe, and it is really burdensome. With this being discussed, let us move forward. Let us dive in a little on the evolution of motor restoration. The history of stroke rehab mirrors the history of neuroscience itself. Early models of care were largely custodial, emphasizing survival, positioning, prevention of deformity, and family support, rather than restoration of the lost neurological function. Now, this conservative orientation was understandable because at that time people thought that the injured brain was a static tissue with limited capacity for meaningful reorganization. With the developments during the mid 20th century, we were introduced to more active rehabilitation paradigms. Conventional physiotherapy focused on muscle strength, joint range of motion, bed mobility, transfers, balance, gait training, activities of daily living. And all these were the essential foundations thought to prevent secondary complications such as contracture, deconditioning, pressure injury, learned dependence. And through these conventional therapies, many patients during the mid 20th century achieved meaningful functional gains through structured practice, repetition, and progressive mobility. Subsequently, neurodevelopmental schools of thought reframed stroke as a disorder of abnormal movement control rather than simply muscle weakness. So at that time, we started having schools of thought like the Bobath concept, Brunstorm's recovery stages, Roots facilitation techniques, and PNF. All these emphasized on tone modulation, reflex integration, postural alignment, sensory inputs, selective movement patterns. Now, it is important to notice that these approaches recognized that quality of movement mattered and that sensory motor experience could shape recovery. Their enduring contribution lied in the clinical appreciation of trunk control, scapular mechanics, handling, task preparation, and movement analysis. After that, from the late 20th century onwards, we had more and more research on motor learning theories, on neuroplasticity research, which came from animal models as well as human neuroimaging. These demonstrated that cortical maps and the brain is dynamic. It is use dependent. जितना ज़्यादा use करोगे उतना ज़्यादा improvement आएगा functionally. And that it is sensitive to training intensity. जितना ज़्यादा movement करोगे, जितना ज़्यादा practice करोगे, जितना intense practice करोगे उतना better functional gain मिलेगा. Now, this catalyzed a task-oriented approach such as repetitive task practice, treadmill training, bilateral arm training, mirror therapy, mental imagery, CIMT, and all these therapies. And with this, the central thesis shifted decisively that the brain changes when behavior changes repeatedly under meaningful conditions. Now, CIMT became the emblematic of this area by constraining the less affected limb and intensively training the paretic limb. Clinicians got to reverse learned non-use and they drove cortical re-engagement. Same way, locomotor training harnessed central pattern generation, task specificity, cardiovascular conditioning, and these approaches placed dosage and salience and participation at the center of recovery. Now, if we talk of the contemporary era, it can be described as technology assisted and data informed rehabilitation. We now have robotics, wearable sensors, virtual reality, brain computer interfaces, and neuromodulation tools which have expanded the arena of rehab. Yet, the historical lesson remains clear. No technological advance fully replaces sound clinical reasoning, progressive task practice, or therapeutic alliance. Instead, each era contributes layers of insight. Modern precision rehab stands on the shoulders of every phase that came before, and we'll be seeing how. So, talking about the trifecta of modern neurotech ecosystems over here, now let me explain these one by one. First, let me explain the term neuromodulation. Neuromodulation emerged from a simple but powerful proposition. If post-stroke recovery depends on plasticity, then clinicians may improve the outcomes by altering the excitability of neural circuits before as well as during training. अगर plasticity से benefit आएगा, let us modulate the levels of neuroplasticity. So rather than teaching movement alone, now neural stimulation attempts to optimize the substrate from which movement emerges, that is the brain itself, neuroplasticity itself. Let us talk a little about neural interfaces and stimulation. We have two types of direct modulations of the central nervous system via the non-invasive brain stimulation as well as brain-computer interfaces. Let us start with NIBS, that is non-invasive brain stimulation, in that the first category is transcranial magnetic stimulation. Now ये होता क्या है? So it uses rapidly changing magnetic fields to induce electrical currents in the cortex. Magnetic field को modulate करते हैं and it will produce electrical stimulation to the motor cortex. Now, repeated use of transcranial magnetic stimulation protocols have shown to facilitate as well as to suppress the targeted networks in the brain. That will again depend on the stimulation frequency, intensity, and pattern. Now, in stroke, one influential model proposes that the normal cortex, the unaffected hemisphere, may exert excessive transcallosal inhibition on the lesion hemisphere. That is normal hemisphere, abnormal hemisphere या affected hemisphere के ऊपर inhibition का influence करेगा. Accordingly now, if we give low frequency inhibitory stimulation over the normal, that is contra-lesional motor cortex, and if we give high frequency excitatory stimulation on the affected cortex or the hemisphere, it has seen that it rebalances the interhemispheric dynamics. That is, जो दोनों right and left hemisphere of the brain के बीच में जो dynamics है, that gets balanced. Meta-analytic findings have generally suggested that there are modest changes, but again those changes are clinically relevant. We have seen gains in upper limb impairment and function with TMS when it was paired with active therapy. Those studies have showed a responder variability, but still the changes were significant. So that is the first thing, transcranial magnetic stimulation. The second is transcranial direct current stimulation, TDCS. Now this is more portable and inexpensive as compared to TMS. यहाँ पे क्या होता है, weak electrical currents, typically between 1 to 2 milliampere, are delivered through the scalp electrodes, and these cause a bias in the neuronal membrane potentials. Generally, anodal stimulation is given to increase the excitability, whereas cathodal stimulation is given to reduce hyperexcitability. And bihemispheric montages attempt to combine both these strategies. Again, if we talk of evidence, so evidence is mixed over here, but again it is encouraging. Particularly when this transcranial direct current stimulation is synchronized with task practice, depending on the anatomical variability, the lesion's location, the montage which is selected, we have seen improvement in the patient's functional levels. So that is the first thing. पहला था transcranial magnetic stimulation. The second is transcranial direct current stimulation. Now the third technique is peripheral stimulation technique, which we are very well aware of. We have NMES, that is neuromuscular electrical stimulation, which activates peripheral nerves to generate contraction, and simultaneously it will increase the afferent input, sensory input to the CNS. The second category in peripheral stimulation is functional electrical stimulation. Again, it applies this principle during purposeful tasks such as grasping, gait, and evidence has supported gains in the patient's gait speed, amount of dorsiflexion, upper limb activation, as well as task engagement when we have used NMES as well as FES. The fifth in this, the newest category, is vagus nerve stimulation, which represents, as I said, a newer frontier. By pairing successful movements with brief bursts of vagal nerve stimulation, investigators aim to leverage or to modulate the amount of acetylcholine and norepinephrine, which are neurotransmitters, and basically this strengthens the relevant synapses. Again, earlier trials over here have reported promising upper limb improvement, but again there are implementation challenges such as the cost, device availability, and questions regarding the criteria for selection of patient. But across all neuromodulation strategies, an important theme recurs that stimulation is rarely standalone. Its greatest value appears when it is integrated with high quality behavioral training methods such as CIMT, task oriented training. So important to know over here is, or to note over here is, that electricity can prime the stage, but practice will always perform the play. So this is about neural interfaces and stimulation, that is NIBS, non-invasive brain stimulation. Coming to BCI, that is brain computer interface, here the goal is to translate the neural intent into measurable output. Therefore, it will try to create new pathways in the brain which are important for communication, for control as well as rehabilitation. दिमाग में हम जो भी सोच रहे हैं, whenever we think something, we intend to do a movement, or we are doing motor imagery where we are thinking of a movement. So at the same time, what happens, the brain computer interfaces will detect the signals in the brain and it will send the output to the wearable exoskeletons and endpoint robots. So in stroke care, their most compelling application is for patients with severe paresis who do not have sufficient control of movement, and conventional methods are not sufficient to bring any significant neuroplastic changes. There we can use brain computer interface. Now mostly these brain computer interfaces rely on EEG, that is electroencephalography, which records the electrical activity on the brain cortical oscillations from scalp electrodes. Now whenever we attempt movement or there is motor imagery, we generally see activation in the sensory motor cortex, especially on EEG in the mu and the beta bands, and this is detected by the input system of BCI. Signal processing pipelines are there. They will remove the artifact, they will remove the noise, they will extract the information, and they will send this information through the feedback loop to the exoskeletons. They will send this detected intent, which will trigger the robotic hand orthosis, the virtual limb movements, the FES, and the patient will receive sensory feedback which is linked to voluntary neural effort. Brain computer interface, EEG के electrodes लगे हैं scalp पे, it will detect the intention of movement, it will trigger the exoskeleton, and that will help you perform the movement. And over repeated trials, we have found that BCI, especially coupling this with our task oriented trainings, may strengthen residual networks in the brain. It will enhance engagement in the cortex, and it will reduce learned non-use. Clinical studies have shown improvement in upper limb function, motor score, engagement, particularly in subacute and chronic stroke populations for patients who have moderate to severe impairments. And when BCI, that is brain computer interface, is combined with functional electrical stimulation, it has shown very attractive results. But again, the translation to clinical practice is limited by setup complexity, by signal noise, calibration demands, fatigue, and the need for technically trained personnel. Now, the next generation of brain computer interface is likely to be more variable. It will be more adaptive, it will be multimodal, integrating EEG with EMG, inertial sensors, eye trackers, etc. With that, let us talk about the next two categories, endpoint robots and wearable exoskeletons. Now, robotic rehabilitation was born from a practical observation. Human therapists are highly skilled, but we are biologically finite. We get exerted, we get fatigued, and on continuous repetitions, the quality of care that we deliver diminishes. But robots, by contrast, excel at consistency, endurance, quantification. And this has led to the advancement in the field of robotics for rehabilitation. Talking about endpoint robots, these are single point interaction robots where the single joint is used. For example, they are generally given for hand, wrist. Okay, upper limb robotic systems can broadly be categorized into end effector, that is endpoint robots, or exoskeleton. End effector systems or endpoint robots interact through the hand or forearm, and they will basically guide your movement in space. If suppose you're trying to reach out, it will help you reach the object well. Whereas exoskeletons align with the anatomical joints, they can assist multiple joints like shoulder, elbow, wrist, finger, hip, knee, ankle. Okay, and both may give a certain amount of passive movement, active assisted, resisted, or resistance as needed by the patient at the real time situation. The theoretical basis for robotics is not simply movement repetition, but it is a high dose, task relevant, feedback rich practice. And we have seen multiple research articles which have shown significant improvements for patients' functionality with these robotic systems. Systematic reviews again have generally supported robotic therapy, but as an adjunct to conventional rehabilitation when it is used for upper limb and for gait recovery. But again, we have barriers including cost, maintenance, workflow integration, uncertainty regarding cost effectiveness in rural settings. So these are certain conditions which need to be thought of. So this is the modern neurotech ecosystem. Let's move forward and understand something known as this point over here, hitting the ceiling, the efficacy ceiling. Let me explain what that is. So, this image highlights a critical turning point in neurorehabilitation, the transition from general technological solutions to precision rehab. Now, on the x-axis, we can see technological advancement, and on the y-axis, we can see patient's motor recovery. And it is clear from the green mark, the green line, that जैसे जैसे technologically हम advance हुए, वैसे वैसे patient का motor recovery बढ़ता गया till a point where now we have a plateau that is red in color. So while we have advanced hardware, we are still hitting a ceiling because our measurement and application methods are outdated. So let us understand a little about the variability problem as well as subjective measurement. If we talk of subjective measurement, traditional stroke rehabilitation relies heavily on clinical scales, which are gold standard, which are foundational, but still they have significant limitations in a modern tech-driven environment. We have traditional scales such as Fugel-Meyer, modified Ashworth scale, motor activity log. All these have high rater variability. What is rater variability? That means if two therapists might score the same patient, they may get different results. And the second thing is ceiling effects. Matlab, a patient may improve significantly in real world situation, but the scale, the outcome measure may not be sensitive enough to reflect it or to detect it. So these are the two significant problems with a subjective measurement, which is causing the basic challenge. So if a measurement tool is a low resolution, we cannot feed accurate data into the high-tech robots. So this is the first problem, subjective measurement. The second intermediate problem is a variability gap. No two strokes are identical. Two patients will have a lesion in the internal capsule. Still they may have different clinical symptomatology. They may have clinical pictures which are different, functional levels which are different. So currently many robotic interventions treat the disease category. We have a protocol for stroke, we have a protocol for Parkinsonism, but what we need is a specific neuroprofile protocol, a protocol which is based on the neuroprofile of the patient. Second, a patient's performance varies from morning to afternoon. सुबह में कुछ और होगा, afternoon में कुछ और होगा, रात में कुछ और होगा, because there are multiple factors which affect it. We have fatigue, we have spasticity level, we have the environment, we have the cognitive overload. And standardized robotic protocols, conventional therapeutic protocols often fail to account these daily fluctuations. And these two major problems have led to this red colored line, which is the plateau, ceiling reach ho gaya hai. So now what is the solution? What is the missing link? So to break the efficacy ceiling, industry of rehabilitation is moving towards kinematic biomarkers. Instead of the therapist watching a patient reach for a cup, we now have sensors, we have AI which measures every sub-millimeter differentiations and deviations. It can measure the torque, it can measure the velocity, it can measure whether the movement was smooth or not. So that is one thing. The second, real-time adaptation. If the patient is getting fatigued, the robot will increase the assistance. If the patient is actively doing well, the robot may increase the resistance. So hardware resistance and assistance is given in real time by these robots. And third, closing the loop. By integrating EEG, that is brain activity detection, with EMG, muscle activity detection, directly by the robo control systems, we can move from training the limb to training the connection between brain and muscle, and that can help us reach better functional levels for our patients. So this is about hitting the ceiling and how we can modify it. The next thing, the paradigm shift, introducing rehablomics. Rehablomics is a conceptual framework that finally bridges the gap between technology and measurement problems. Let us see each one in detail. The first is real world behavior. Now, you may know, traditional rehab often focuses and happens in a sterile clinic. But rehablomics, it starts by acknowledging that stroke recovery must translate into the patient's actual life. So instead of just measuring range of motion of one joint, we look at the physical requirement of a specific task. रीच करना है, हैंड में कितनी मूवमेंट चाहिए, फिंगर ओपनिंग कितना है, रिस्ट ओपनिंग कितना है, एल्बो का मूवमेंट क्या है. And innovation, we are moving away from abstract exercises towards context dependent training. If environment changes, our neural requirement is changing, and with rehablomics we have robots which can change at the same real time. Second is neuromechanics, that means the interaction between the brain, neural control, and the mechanical structures like muscles and joints. Now we know after a stroke, electrical signal from the brain is often noisy or weak. The mechanical structures like the limb may have spasticity, fatigue, contracture. So the goal over here is to understand why a movement is failing. Is it a lack of neural drive? Brain से signal नहीं आ पा रहा कि mechanical block है, contracture है muscle में. And innovations in EMG and high-speed kinematics now allow clinicians to see this interaction between the brain and mechanical structures in real time. The third is rehablomics filter. This is the most advanced level. It takes the messy, complex biological data from the patient and it will filter out it into hard numbers. Unlike subjective measurement, which we do in our clinics once a week, once a month, these filters are attached to the variables and they give us continuous data. Every micro movement, every brain wave is stored by the EEG, every muscle activation pattern is stored by the EMG, every joint angle, every joint velocity, every kinematic is stored. And finally, it removes the guesswork. The therapist does not have to think whether the movement is happening well. We have the exact data to understand whether the movement is smooth, whether the movement is efficient, whether the target has been reached. The fourth is patient characterization. On the left hand side, you can see a graph. There are 3 color zones. Red shows the baseline when the patient started. Blue shows post-training effect, the current status of the patient, and green shows the normative healthy area, the target goal achieved by the individual or to be achieved by the individual based on his age, his demographic, his lesion. And by summing all these data, clinicians now can predict the recovery trajectories with high accuracy, whether the patient is moving or not. If the patient is not moving from red to the blue band, that is from baseline to post-training, rehablomics filters will tell the therapist exactly why the patient is not improving. It will allow us for exact immediate changes in the therapeutic protocols. And this is how the paradigm is shifting with the upcoming rehablomics. Let us go further into detail. Let us talk about biomarkers. So this shows a technical blueprint for rehablomics. It breaks down into the specific biomarkers. Let us start with the first one, decoding the movement, that is kinematics. This is the most common entry point for robotic rehab. This uses sensors to track when the patient's limb is actually moving, how it is moving in space. The sensors over here are robotic sensors, and it is having spatial tracking, that is a space related tracking system. Now, what is the innovation? Here we are moving beyond simple question whether the patient reached the target. We are measuring trajectory errors and path length ratios at this point of time. If you talk about the clinical impact of kinematics, it identifies compensatory movements. We've seen it in our clinics. If a stroke patient leans, their whole trunk is leaning forward to reach a cup instead of just the hand moving. And kinematics will flag this as a trajectory error. This will allow the robot to block the compensatory movement. It will block the wrong movement and it will force the correct movement. The patient is not learning any compensatory mechanism. There are strong neuroplastic changes which are occurring with this. The second is decoding the muscle via EMG. We know EMG looks at the electrical activity of the neuromuscular junction. Now, traditional EMGs used one or two stickers or sensors. High density surface EMG uses a grid of sensors to map the motor unit decomposition. We'll be seeing the key metrics of each of these three in a little while. Clinical impact in stroke, muscles often fire together in a desynchronized way, in a synergistic recruitment manner. EMG will allow therapists to see if the patient is actually moving, actually activation हो रहा है कि नहीं हो रहा है. It will also track exercise induced fatigue. It will prevent overtraining, and that will prevent further injuries. That is about EMG. The third is EEG. This is the gold standard for neuroplasticity. It measures the brain's electrical activity during rehab. Signal over here comes from CNS. We are measuring corticomuscular coherence. Brain और muscle के बीच में कितना rhythmicity है, कितना synchronization है, we are finding that. This will be used to determine if a movement is truly causing any neuroplastic change, or the movement is just passively happening with the robo. We can understand functional connectivity over here. So if in brief, in a simple language I need to say, EEG will confirm that the patient is trying to move, intention pata chalega. EMG will confirm whether the right muscle is moving. We can understand muscle activation. And kinematics will confirm whether the limb, whether the part of the body is moving in the right direction, in the right path. It will help us know about execution. So these are the three biomarkers. Let us see their metrics in detail one by one. Let us start with EMG. In EMG, we have three metrics. The first is muscle synergy and high density SEMG. As I already told you, traditional EMG uses a couple sensors, whereas high density SEMG, as you can see in this figure, on the arm, as you can see on the forearm, as you can see, there is a 2D array. There is an entire loop which captures detailed map of electrical activity. The goal over here is to decompose complex signals into synergies. We all know what is a synergy. It is a specific pattern the brain uses to coordinate multiple muscles at once. Now, we all know that in stroke, these synergies often become fixed. They become deorganized. Suppose a patient is trying to flex the hand, the elbow, they will not be able to do it without shoulder hitching. So the the technology allows clinicians to see these abnormal patterns and program robots in such a way that they can disrupt these compensatory mechanisms. The second is intermuscular coherence. That means the mathematical correlation between different muscle signals, how the muscles are interacting with each other. So the goal over here is to identify the shared neural frequency. It will tell us if the CNS is successfully sending commands to the group of muscles. So this acts as a biomarker for functional motor recovery. Suppose अगर coherence बढ़ रहा है, so we can understand कि corticospinal tract is firing well. If this coherence is decreasing, we can know that there is a problem between the muscles working, or there is a problem from the command center. The third is triggering adaptation. Using machine learning, the system monitors the frequency of the muscle signals to detect the onset of fatigue. Fatigue kab ho raha hai? Before we can see it, before it is visible to our eye, to the patient's realization, the machine, the robo will identify fatigue. The goal over here again is to prevent compensatory movement. When a patient gets tired, we know the patient starts doing compensatory movement. So this creates a feedback loop. When the EMG will detect fatigue, robo will increase assistance or it will stop the session. So we are not overworking the muscle, we are not fatiguing the patient, and we are having good quality of movements. So these are the metrics for EMG. The next are the metrics for EEG, in that the first thing is functional connectivity and symmetry. Before intensive robotic therapy begins, clinicians need to know the state of the biological hardware, that is the brain. What is BSI? Brain Symmetry Index is the index or the measure of symmetry between the right and the left hemispheres of the brain. As we already discussed, in stroke what happens? The normal hemisphere tries to inhibit the activity of the affected hemisphere. Now, after a stroke, the electrical power in the affected hemisphere often drops significantly because it is inhibited. So, measuring the amount of this asymmetry can help us understand the prognosis. It can help us understand how many motor circuits are actually intact in the brain. That is BSI, Brain Symmetry Index. The second is functional connectivity. This maps us how different regions in the brain are connected to each other, how they talk with each other. Suppose if the brain is too disconnected, we can have robots do certain tasks, help with movement before we try our oriental or conventional therapies. So that is the first metric. The second is corticomuscular coherence. This is the intermediate level. This is a critical biomarker for physical rehabilitation. It doesn't just look at the brain, it looks at the synchronization between the motor cortex and the specific muscles. Brain और muscle के बीच के अंदर क्या connection है. Corticomuscular coherence acts as signal quality. Suppose coherence बढ़ रहा है, that means brain का command muscle को बराबर पहुंच रहा है. If there is a problem, we can detect it. If a patient is moving their arm using a robo, but CMC is low, robo is doing majority of the movement is passive, तो क्या करना है? रोबो का assistance level हमको कम करना है. So forcing the patient to engage their neural pathways is the main goal of understanding CMC, that is corticomuscular coherence. The third is sensory motor rhythm and beta bands or ERD. ERD means event related desynchronization. Now this is the most advanced frontier of stroke rehabilitation. This focuses on motor imagery and motor preparation. Now if we talk of mu and beta bands, these are specific brain frequencies detected on the EEG when we are thinking about moving or we are doing motor imagery. And these ERDs, that is event related desynchronization, when a patient prepares to move, the brain breaks the waves and their usual rhythm. Now if we talk of innovations in BCI over here, brain computer interface ke innovations over here, so for a patient with zero limb movement, that is a patient having hemiplegia, if we use these rhythms to drive the brain computer interface, the brain computer interface will read the patient's intention to move through the sensory motor changes in the brain. Based on that, it will trigger the robotic exoskeleton that will help patient do the movement. So this creates a powerful Hebbian learning effect. We have all heard neurons that fire together wire together. So by seeing and feeling their arm move exactly when they think about it, the brain is encouraged to rebuild the damaged motor pathways. And this is a main driver for neuroplasticity. So these are the key metrics for EEG. Coming to the third, the key metrics for kinematics. Now let me explain this figure. On the left side, we see a hand, that is an exoskeleton. On the right side, we see the target, the goal trajectory. The green line between the two is the ideal trajectory of how the movement should occur. The red line is the baseline stroke trajectory, when the patient is doing it for the first time in the learning phase, what is happening. And the blue line is the target which is achieved post rehabilitation with all these rehabiliomic devices. Let us see the metrics one by one. So the baseline stroke trajectory, that is the red line here, you can see is highly erratic. There is overshoot, there is undershoot, because the brain cannot smoothly regulate muscle timing. Now traditionally, a therapist might simply note poor coordination. In the innovative model of rehabiliomics, we can now measure normalized jerk, that is, we can measure the rate of change of acceleration. So the high jerk will indicate that there is lack of neural smoothness. The brain is not causing coordinated movements. The second, efficiency and path correction. Now, as the patient begins using endpoint robots that we've seen, the left side, the hand, exoskeleton, the focus shifts to reducing waist effort, the focus shifts to reducing compensatory movement. In this, the path length ratio is a key metric for efficiency. It compares the patient's actual path to the patient's, it compares the patient's actual path to the ideal trajectory of movement, that is the shortest distance. The second is trajectory error. Robots provide assistance as needed. If the patient's hand deviates too far from the green line, the robot will gently nudge the patient back in the direction of movement. So this is real time correction. जैसे movement हो रही है, at the same time simultaneously there is correction, assistance, resistance given by the robot. And this is essential for preventing the brain from learning incorrect compensatory patterns of movement. The third is the most advanced part of stroke rehabilitation, the spectral arc or the movement, the smoothness, accuracy, precision. Now, with this, we don't just look at one successful reach. Suppose if the patient is doing a TOT, patient has to practice it 100 times. We are not just looking at one successful movement, one successful reach. We are looking at variable error which occurs across all these 100 repetitions. So the true recovery, that is the ability to reach the bullseye, is done consistently without mental strain. Now this is a sophisticated measure of smoothness which is less sensitive to movement speed, the spectral arc length. It allows us clinicians to differentiate between a patient who is moving fast but shaking to a patient who is doing the movement slow but has regained true neuromuscular control. This is spectral arc length. And the fourth frontier is posture and workspace mapping. This is a final stage of innovation. We are moving beyond the hand, we are looking at the whole body. First measure, trunk displacement mapping. Many stroke patients cheat by leaning their entire torso forward when they try to reach an object. Second is workplace normalization. These advanced sensors are now able to map the normalized reaching area. Recovery is not just about reaching one target, it is about regaining the entire 3D bubble around you. It is about your entire body and how it is maintained in the environment. So these are the four key metrics for kinematics. And this is how it bridges the gap between technology and healthcare, between technology and rehabilitation. Coming to the next slide. Translating biology into ICF framework. This image ties the high-tech biological data back to the core of clinical practice, that is the WHO's ICF, International Classification of Functioning, Disability and Health. So here we can see on the left hand side the input, which is the multimodal feed. The process begins by funneling two distant streams into the clinical filter. The raw biomarkers, that is, as we have explored, this include EEG, EMG, kinematics. This data is fed into the framework. The second, contextual factors. This is where the human element comes, the patient's home environment, patient's personal factors, patient's personal motivation, social support system. All this data is fed into the clinical filter. The second is the ICF domain, the what of recovery, the intermediate level. Now this filter will organize data into three pillars of ICF, as we already know. The first is body structure and functional impairments. This uses EEG and EMG to objectively measure improvements in motor control, the cognitive level of the patient, the emotional status, and here we aim to fix the broken biological mechanism, the impairments. The second, activity limitations. Using kinematics, using wearable exoskeletons, we can track performance in self-care, mobility and beyond. The goal, can the patient feed themselves? Can they walk 10 meters? This is where biological recovery will meet functional independence. This is our goal. The third filter is participation restriction. This is the most advanced use of data. We are monitoring a patient's real world behavior. We can assess if they are returning to their social roles, to their employment. We can see whether they are fully reintegrating into the society. After that comes a third arena, that is holistic health condition. This is final output, not a score. This is holistic overall. Now this shows an important feature, that is stratification. By mapping biomarkers directly to these domains, clinicians can stratify patients. Let me give an example. Suppose a patient might have great biological recovery, there is very low impairment level, but still the patient is struggling to return to work. There is high participation restriction beyond low impairment level. Now, this can be affected by environmental factors. In 2026 and beyond, rehab protocols are not static. If the data shows the patient's impairments are improving but their activities are not, the therapist knows to shift focus from robotics to real world task training. So this is the final synthesis, this is the complete picture. So, by translating biology into the ICF, we ensure that the modern neurotech ecosystem doesn't just create better data, but it creates better human outcomes. Moving forward to the next slide, the rise of continuous digital markers. We have two categories: wearable tele-rehab, tachygraphy, and passive monitoring. Let us start with the first. So, wearable tele-rehab, this is the basic level which is bridging clinic to home gap. The most immediate innovation is the use of consumer and medical grade wearables to extend the reach of healthcare and rehabilitation beyond hospital walls. The first, functional range of motion. Traditional rehabilitation measures range of motion in a static clinical setting. Tele-rehab uses inertial sensors to track how a patient actually uses their limb during a 24-hour cycle. Second, convergence point. These track the intersection of physical activity and energy consumption. These track the intersection of physical activity and energy consumption. For a stroke survivor, efficiency is the key. Telerehabilitation ensures they aren't overexerting themselves or they are not using dangerous compensatory movements when they are at home. So the clinical impact is wide and large. This provides longitudinal data that was previously missing. Clinicians no longer have to ask how active you are with this week to the patient. The data will speak for itself. That is about wearable tele-rehab. The second thing is tachygraphy and passive monitoring. Tachygraphy is a field where we can analyze the timing and pressure of screen tapping actions on the smartphone. AI can now detect subtle changes in tremor, bradykinesia, fine motor coordination of the patients. Second is homeostasis tracking beyond movement. Wearables, we know smartwatches. Now we can monitor autonomic vitals such as heart rate variability, sleep quality, stress level. And the clinical impact again is wide. This allows for early detection of decline. If a patient's tapping speed slows down or their sleep patterns break, it could be a precursor to a secondary event, or it could be a sign that current rehabilitation intensity is too high and we can accommodate it. But still, there are challenges. What are the challenges? The first and the major challenge is how to interpret data in an uncontrolled environment. In a clinic, the flow is fat, the room is quiet. At home, there are stairs, there's carpet, there's distraction. So, the goal over here is that innovative advances in machine learning are now being used to filter out noise from signal. The system must differentiate when a patient is stumbling because they are tired versus when they are stumbling because of a neurological setback. So, to keep recovery going, these systems now use gamification, and real time feedback. If the Rehablomics filter detects a plateau at home, the app might suggest a specific high intensity task to spark further the neuroplasticity level. So, by integrating these continuous digital biomarkers, stroke rehabilitation is no longer a session which ends at 5 p.m. It is a continuous feedback loop that lives on the patient's wrists and in their pockets. It ensures that progress is being made with advanced robotics and neural interfaces is maintained and it is built up in the real world. Finally, we are trying to make the patient fully functional and independent where there is a data driven reality. Coming to the next image, that is simulating recovery with a digital twin. In this figure on the left hand side, we can see physical patient, the foundation. In this stage, the patient is outfitted with the sensors and robotics as we can see in the first image, that is by EEG, EMG exoskeletons. And as the physical patient moves, Every bit of data, the neural intention in the brain, muscle activation, the limb trajectory, all of this data is captured. We are no longer just observing the patient, we are digitizing their biological state. This will provide raw material which is needed to build the computational model. The second is the computational neural rehabilitation model, or the digital twin. It is a virtual mirror of the patient's musculoskeletal and neural system. It works on physics based equations. It simulates how the patient's body should move versus how the patient's body is moving. This algorithm accounts for specific neural capacity of the individual. Suppose if a stroke has damaged a certain pathway, the digital twin will simulate how other pathways in the brain are being recruited for compensation. It will move away from the generic clinical protocols and bring about changes via rehabilomics. The predictive dosage over here. This is the most advanced frontier. Before a patient even puts on a wearable exoskeleton, the therapist tests different kind of treatments on the digital twin. The clinician can now simulate 100 different exercise schedules in seconds to see which one leads to the fastest recovery for this patient. And by predicting motor recovery before deploying physical prototypes, we can ensure that the patient is never given a task which is too difficult. It can lead to frustration. Never given a task which is too easy. It can lead to plateau. So the clinical impact again is wide. It allows for precision dosage. Just as a doctor prescribes a significant specific milligram of medicine, a physiotherapist can now prescribe a specific dose of robotic assistance or neural stimulation. So there is a transition from basic mechanical assistance to advanced digital twin simulation, which will ensure that the efficacy ceiling that we've seen is broken. It will allow patients to reach levels of fundamental functional independence that were previously thought impossible. So this is about the digital twin. Coming to this part, the crucial part, crossing the translational valley of death, seeing what all gaps are there. So this is a roadmap for moving these innovations out of the lab and into clinics like yours. It identifies four critical critical gaps that must be bridged. The first is the knowledge and research gap, that is basic to intermediate problem. We must move from it works in a lab, it works in research, to it works for everyone. How to do that? We need to establish MCIDs, that is minimal clinically important differences, proving that a 5% increase in a sensor reading actually translates to a patient being able to actually do a functional task. We need to find MCIDs for our outcome measures that is very sensitive. Second is the clinical gap. This is a little advanced. This is the push to automate scale administration. Instead of a therapist spending 30 minutes filling out a questionnaire or a form, there is a machine. Machine learning analyzes data from the robot to generate the score automatically, immediately. The fourth gap, translational gap, this is the frontier. This addresses the high cost and regularity hurdles. The solution is user centered design, creating technology that is affordable and simple enough for a local clinic to operate it without a team of engineers. By bridging these gaps, the biomarker development, which we mentioned, EEG, EMG, kinematic, becomes the glue that allows the hardware to break the ceiling that we've seen. This shift ensures that rehabilitation is no longer a guessing game, but a precision science tailored to the individual's unique brain body connection. This is the basis of rehabilomics. Coming to the final image, the connected patient at the center. Nothing about us without us. We can see in the figure the patient is at the center. The future of neurorehabilitation is not about replacing human therapy with automated robots. It is about integrated, continuous neuromechanical data streams to create truly flexible, person centered, and deeply personalized recovery paths. Technology must adapt to the patient, not the other way around. Thank you so much for